The ultrasound technician's hands trembled as she pointed to the screen, and Helena Lawrence knew before the doctor spoke that everything was about to change. She sat in the sterile examination room at Mercy General Hospital, watching a man she had never met receive news that would alter the trajectory of his entire existence. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating, as Ethan Sullivan's face remained eerily calm, his jaw set in a way that suggested he had already made peace with mortality before the diagnosis even left the oncologist's lips. Helena was 26 years old and had been working as a private nurse for 3 years, specializing in palliative care for terminally ill patients. She had seen death more times than most people her age, had held hands through final breaths, had learned to compartmentalize grief into something manageable. But there was something different about the man sitting across from her in that consultation room, something in the way his dark eyes fixed on the wall behind the doctor's head, refusing to acknowledge the fear that must have been coursing through him. Dr. Patel cleared his throat. "Mr. Sullivan, I understand this is difficult to process. We have options for treatment, though I must be honest about the prognosis." "I appreciate your honesty," Ethan said, his voice steady and deep. He was 32 years old. Helena had learned from his chart, and everything about him screamed success. The tailored charcoal suit, the expensive watch on his wrist, the confident posture even in the face of catastrophic news. "What do you recommend?" Helena took notes as the doctor outlined chemotherapy options, clinical trials, pain management protocols. She had been assigned to Ethan's case by the hospital's private care division, a service reserved for patients who could afford round-the-clock medical attention in their own homes. She knew the type: wealthy individuals who wanted to die with dignity, away from the sterile hospital environment, surrounded by their possessions and their privacy. When the consultation ended, Ethan stood and extended his hand to Helena. "I assume you'll be my nurse." His grip was firm, warm. She noticed he didn't look away when he spoke, didn't treat her like staff but like an equal. "Yes, Mr. Sullivan, I'll be coordinating your care." "Ethan," he corrected. "If we're going to spend the next few months together, we should probably be on a first-name basis." She nodded, gathering her files. "Ethan, I'll need to visit your home tomorrow to assess what medical equipment we'll need. Is afternoon convenient?" "Afternoon is fine." He pulled a business card from his wallet, writing an address on the back. "I live in Ashford Heights." "The gate code is on there too." Ashford Heights. Helena tried to keep her expression neutral, but she knew what that meant. Ashford Heights was where Boston's elite lived, mansions tucked behind iron gates and manicured hedges, the kind of neighborhood she had only seen in magazines. She took the card, slipping it into her pocket. That night, Helena sat in her small apartment in Jamaica Plain, researching Ethan Sullivan on her laptop. What she found made her breath catch. He was not just wealthy. He was one of the youngest billionaires in Massachusetts, having made his fortune in renewable energy. Sullivan's Solar Solutions had revolutionized solar panel efficiency, and Ethan had built an empire before most people finished graduate school. There were photos of him at charity galas, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, standing next to senators and celebrities. He looked different in those pictures, she thought. Lighter. The weight of death had not yet settled on his shoulders. She clicked through articles, reading about his philanthropy, his reputation as a tough but fair businessman, his notable absence from the social scene over the past year. One gossip blog speculated about his reclusiveness, wondering if the confirmed bachelor had finally settled down. Helena closed the laptop, feeling strange about invading his privacy. Tomorrow she would meet him again and everything would be professional. It had to be. The next afternoon, she drove her aging Honda Civic through streets that grew progressively more affluent until she reached the gates of Ashford Heights. The guard checked her credentials before waving her through, and she followed the winding road to an address that led to a modern architectural masterpiece. Glass and steel and clean lines, surrounded by gardens that looked professionally maintained. She parked in the circular driveway, suddenly very aware of how out of place her car looked. Ethan answered the door himself, wearing jeans and a gray sweater, looking more approachable than he had in the hospital. "Helena, come in." The interior was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Boston skyline, minimalist furniture in shades of white and gray, art on the walls that she suspected was original and expensive. But there was warmth too, she noticed. Books stacked on tables, a guitar leaning against the wall, photographs of what looked like family scattered throughout. "This is beautiful," she said, unable to help herself. "Thank you. I bought it 5 years ago and finally finished renovating last year. Ironic timing." He gestured for her to follow him. "I was thinking the guest bedroom on the first floor would work best for medical equipment. It's closest to the main living areas." They spent the next hour discussing logistics. Where to set up the hospital bed, where to store medications, how to arrange the space for maximum comfort and functionality. Ethan was practical and detail-oriented, asking intelligent questions about pain management and side effects. He showed no self-pity, no melodrama. If anything, he seemed to be approaching his own death like a business problem to be solved efficiently. "I'll start chemotherapy next week," he said as they stood in the kitchen, where he had insisted on making her coffee. "Doctor Patel says it might buy me some extra time, though the odds are not great." "How are you feeling about that?" Helena asked, accepting the mug he offered. He leaned against the counter, considering the question. "Honestly, I am not sure. Part of me wants to fight for every extra day. Another part wonders if I should just enjoy what time I have left without poisoning myself with chemicals that probably would not work anyway." "There's no wrong answer," Helena said gently. "This is your decision." "Is it, though?" He looked at her directly, and she saw a flash of something vulnerable in his eyes. "I have employees who depend on me, a company that's in the middle of several major contracts. People are expecting me to fight." "What do you want?" The question seemed to surprise him. He was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee. "I want more time, but I also want whatever time I have to mean something." Over the following weeks, Helena became a fixture in Ethan's life. She arrived every morning at 8, checking his vitals, administering medications, monitoring his response to chemotherapy. The treatments were brutal. She watched him grow pale and nauseous, saw him lose weight despite her careful meal planning, but he never complained. On his bad days, he worked from his home office, conducting video conferences with his executive team. On his better days, he insisted on going into the office, and Helena accompanied him, setting up a discreet medical station in his corner suite on the 43rd floor of the Sullivan building downtown. She learned things about him that would not appear in any business profile. He took his coffee black with 1 sugar. He played guitar when he could not sleep. He had a younger sister named Emma who lived in California and called every evening at 6. He donated anonymously to dozens of charities, something his accountant had let slip during a phone conversation Helena overheard. He was kind to everyone, from the janitor who cleaned his office to the CEO of a rival company who came to discuss a potential merger. "You are not what I expected," Helena said one afternoon as they sat in his home office. He was reviewing contracts and she was updating his medical charts. He looked up, amused. What did you expect? I do not know. Someone more difficult, maybe. Most wealthy people I have worked with treat nurses like servants. That says more about them than about wealth, Ethan replied. He set down his pen, giving her his full attention. My father was a construction worker. He died when I was 15, broke his back on a job site because the company cut corners on safety equipment. I remember how the hospital staff treated my mother, like she was not worth their time because she was wearing her diner uniform and did not have insurance. I swore I would never make anyone feel that way. I am sorry about your father. It was a long time ago, but it's why I started the company the way I did. Workers first, profits second. Seems fitting that I am dying of something money cannot fix. He said it without bitterness, just stating a fact. Money can buy good care, Helena pointed out. It can buy comfort and dignity. It bought you, he said, then immediately looked horrified. That came out wrong. I know what you meant, she said, laughing. It was the first time she had laughed in his presence, and she saw something shift in his expression. You should do that more often, he said quietly. What? Laugh. You are very serious most of the time. I'm your nurse. I am supposed to be serious. You are also human. Tell me something about you that has nothing to do with medicine. She hesitated, unused to patients asking about her life. I paint. Nothing professional, just for myself. Watercolors mostly. It helps me process things. What do you paint? Landscapes. Seascapes. I grew up in Maine near the ocean. I miss it sometimes. What brought you to Boston? Nursing school. I got a scholarship to BU. Stayed because the job opportunities were better here. She did not mention the other reason, the relationship that had ended badly, the need to start fresh somewhere new. That conversation opened something between them. As the weeks turned into months, they talked about everything. Ethan asked about her family, her 3 older brothers who were all fishermen like their father, her mother who ran a bed and breakfast in a tiny coastal town. She learned about his childhood in South Boston, the scholarship to MIT that changed his life, the years of 18-hour days building his company from nothing. He showed her patents for his solar technology, explaining the science with an enthusiasm that made his eyes light up. She brought her watercolors one day and painted while he worked, and he hung the result in his office, a seascape with waves crashing against rocks. The chemotherapy was not working. Dr. Patel delivered the news in early December, 4 months into treatment. The tumors were growing, spreading. Ethan took it with the same steady calm he brought to everything, but Helena saw the tightness around his eyes, the way his hands clenched briefly before relaxing. How long? Ethan asked. 6 weeks. Maybe 8. After the doctor left, Ethan stood at his living room window staring out at the city. Helena did not know what to say. She had been trained for this moment, had comforting words memorized, but they all felt inadequate now. I thought I would be more afraid, Ethan said finally. But mostly I am just angry, not at God or fate or whatever, just angry that there's so much I will not get to do. What did you want to do? He turned to face her, and something in his expression made her heart skip. Fall in love, have kids, grow old with someone. The normal things people take for granted. You still have time, she said, though they both knew 6 weeks was not enough for any of that. Do I? He crossed the room, stopping a few feet away from her. Helena, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting. Her pulse quickened. Okay, I am in love with you. I have been for months, probably since that day you laughed in my office. I know this is wildly inappropriate. You are my nurse, I am your patient, and I am dying. But I cannot keep pretending I do not feel this way, because if there's one thing this diagnosis has taught me, it's that life is too short to leave important things unsaid. The words hung between them, and Helena felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. She had been so careful to maintain boundaries, to keep everything professional, but she could not deny the truth anymore. Somewhere along the way she had fallen too. "Ethan, you do not have to say anything," he interrupted quickly. "I understand if this makes you uncomfortable. I can request a different nurse if you want." "No," she said firmly. "I do not want a different nurse." She took a breath, gathering courage. "I love you too. I have been trying so hard not to, but I do." Relief and joy and sadness crossed his face in rapid succession. "That's the best and worst thing you could have said." "I know." He closed the distance between them, cupping her face in his hands. "Can I kiss you?" She nodded, and when his lips met hers it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle and desperate at the same time, both of them pouring months of restrained emotion into it. When they finally pulled apart, she was crying, and he brushed the tears away with his thumbs. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I am so sorry that this is all I can give you." "Stop apologizing," she said fiercely. "I would rather have 6 weeks with you than a lifetime with anyone else." They made the most of the time they had. Helena moved into his house, no longer just his nurse but his partner. They spent mornings in bed, talking and laughing and memorizing each other. She met his sister Emma, who flew in from California and immediately understood what was happening. Emma pulled Helena aside on the first day, tears in her eyes, and thanked her for making her brother happy in his final weeks. Ethan grew weaker as December progressed. The pain became harder to manage, and Helena adjusted his medications carefully, balancing quality of life with alertness. He wanted to be present for everything, he said. Wanted to remember every moment. On Christmas Eve, he surprised her. They were sitting in front of the fireplace, Helena curled against his chest, when he pulled a small box from his pocket. "I know we cannot have a future," he said. "But I want you to have this anyway." Inside was a ring, simple and elegant, a single diamond on a platinum band. Helena's breath caught. "It's not an engagement ring," Ethan explained. "It's a promise that what we have is real, that I would have married you if time had allowed. That even though I am leaving, what I feel for you is forever." She slipped the ring on her finger, her vision blurred with tears. "I love you so much." "I love you too, more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone." They made love that night, slow and tender, both trying to make time stop. Helena memorized the feel of his skin, the sound of his heartbeat beneath her ear, the way he said her name like a prayer. January arrived with snow and the knowledge that time was running out. Ethan's condition deteriorated rapidly. He spent most days in bed now, the hospital equipment Helena had set up months ago finally necessary. His executives came to visit, and he signed papers transferring power, ensuring his company would continue his vision. He recorded video messages for Emma, for nieces and nephews he wanted to remember him. He updated his will, and Helena was shocked to discover he had left her $10 million. "I do not want your money," she said, upset. "It's not about what you want," he replied gently. "Please, let me take care of you when I am gone. Knowing you will be okay is the only thing that brings me peace." The end came on a gray morning in mid-January. Helena had been awake all night, monitoring his breathing, which had become shallow and labored. Emma was there too, sitting on the other side of the bed, holding her brother's hand. Ethan's eyes opened, finding Helena's face. "Hey," he whispered. "Hey yourself." She tried to smile, but her face was wet with tears. "Do not be sad," he said, his voice barely audible. "These months with you were the happiest of my life. Mine too. Paint something for me, something beautiful, and remember that I loved you with everything I had." "I will, I promise." He smiled, then turned to Emma. "Take care of her." "I will," Emma sobbed. "I promise." His eyes closed and his breathing slowed. Helena held his hand, feeling his pulse grow fainter under her fingers. At 8:30 in the morning, with sunlight breaking through the clouds and streaming through his bedroom window, Ethan Sullivan took his last breath. The grief was overwhelming. Helena had lost patience before, but this was different. This was the man she loved, the person who had changed everything about how she saw the world. Emma stayed with her through those first awful days, planning the funeral, managing the estate, making sure Helena ate and slept. The funeral was enormous. Hundreds of people came to honor Ethan, employees and business associates, and people whose lives he had touched through his quiet philanthropy. Helena stood beside Emma during the service, wearing the ring he had given her, listening to people talk about his brilliance and his kindness. But none of them knew him the way she did, she thought. None of them knew how he sang off-key in the shower, or how he liked his eggs scrambled with cheese, or how he cried during sentimental movies. After the funeral, Ethan's lawyer presented Helena with a letter. She waited until she was alone to open it. "My dearest Helena, if you are reading this, I am gone, and I hope it was peaceful. I hope you were there with me at the end, though I know how hard that must have been for you. I have spent my whole adult life building things. Companies, technologies, wealth. But the only thing I ever built that truly mattered was the life I had with you these past months. You gave me something I did not think I would ever have, genuine love and happiness. For that, I am eternally grateful. I know you are grieving right now, and I am sorry to be the cause of your pain. But I need you to promise me something. Do not let this destroy you. Do not let losing me make you afraid to love again. You have so much life ahead of you, and you deserve every beautiful thing the world can offer. The money I left you is not about debt or obligation. It's about freedom. Do whatever makes you happy. Travel, paint. Open that gallery you mentioned once in passing. Live the fullest life possible, and know that somewhere, in whatever comes after this, I am cheering you on. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for making my last months a gift instead of a tragedy. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. All my love, always." Ethan, she read the letter 3 times, crying until she had no tears left. Then she looked at the ring on her finger and made a decision. The next year was hard. Helena took a leave of absence from nursing, using Ethan's inheritance to travel to all the places he had told her about but never got to see. She went to Italy and painted the Tuscan countryside. She visited Japan during cherry blossom season. She hiked through New Zealand and sailed around Greece. She carried him with her in every place, telling him about everything she saw. When she returned to Boston, she bought a small gallery space in the South End. The Helena Lawrence Gallery opened in the spring, featuring her own watercolors and works by other emerging artists. Emma flew in for the opening, and they stood together in front of Helena's largest painting, a portrait of Ethan standing at his window, looking out at the city he had loved. "He would be so proud of you," Emma said. "I hope so." The gallery became successful, not because of Ethan's money or connections, but because Helena had a genuine eye for talent. She featured artists who reminded her of herself, people who painted to process grief and joy and the complicated beauty of being human. 2 years after Ethan died, on a cold January morning, Helena received a letter from Ethan's company. Sullivan Solar Solutions had just landed a massive contract with the federal government, a deal that would bring renewable energy to underserved communities across the country. Attached was a note from the CEO, a woman named Sandra who had worked with Ethan for over a decade. "Ethan always said this project was his dream. We finally made it happen. We are dedicating it to his memory, and we wanted you to know that his vision lives on." Helena hung the letter in the gallery, next to Ethan's portrait. She thought about how he had worried his time would not mean anything, and she wished she could tell him how wrong he had been. His company was changing the world. His philanthropy had touched thousands of lives. And his love had transformed her completely. 3 years after his death, Helena met someone. Daniel was an architect who came into the gallery looking for art for a new building. He was kind and funny and patient with her grief. She told him about Ethan on their third date, expecting him to be uncomfortable, but he had listened carefully and then said, "He sounds like he was an amazing person. I am glad you had that time together." They dated slowly, carefully. Helena had been afraid she could not love again, but Ethan's letter had been right. She had so much life ahead of her, and Ethan would have wanted her to be happy. When Daniel proposed a year later, she said yes, but she kept wearing Ethan's ring on her right hand, a reminder of the love that had changed her. She married Daniel in a small ceremony in Maine, on the beach where she had grown up. Emma stood as her bridesmaid, and during the reception, Emma pulled Helena aside. "Ethan came to me in a dream last night," Emma said. "I do not usually believe in that stuff, but it felt real. He said to tell you he's happy for you." Helena laughed through tears. "That sounds like something he would say." 5 years after Ethan's death, Helena gave birth to a son. She and Daniel named him Ethan Sullivan Lawrence Reid, honoring the man who had taught her that love did not need time to be infinite. She hung a photo of the original Ethan in the nursery, and as baby Ethan grew, she told him stories about his namesake, about the brilliant man who had revolutionized solar energy, about his kindness and his courage, about how he had loved with everything he had even when time was running out. The gallery continued to thrive. Helena added a second location, then a third. She established a foundation in Ethan's name, providing grants to artists from low-income backgrounds. Every year on the anniversary of his death, she painted a new watercolor and donated it to charity auction, raising money for cancer research. 10 years after Ethan died, Sullivan Solar Solutions announced a breakthrough in battery technology that would make renewable energy storage affordable for everyone. The stock price soared, and Helena's share, which she had inherited as part of Ethan's estate, became worth exponentially more. She immediately donated half to the Ethan Sullivan Foundation, funding research and art programs and scholarships for kids from South Boston who dreamed of MIT. She was sitting in her gallery office when Emma called with the news. "Can you believe it? Everything he worked for is finally happening. We are going to change the world." "He already did," Helena said, looking at the portrait on her wall. "This is just making it official." That evening, she went home to Daniel and their 2 children, 6-year-old Ethan and 3-year-old Sophie. She cooked dinner while Daniel helped with homework, and she felt the quiet contentment of a life well lived. She had not expected this, she thought. After Ethan died, she had been certain she would never feel whole again. But here she was, surrounded by love and purpose and joy. Later, after the kids were asleep, she sat in her studio and painted. The canvas had been calling to her for weeks, and now she knew what it needed to be. She painted Ethan the way she remembered him best, sitting in his home office, guitar in hand, looking at her with that expression that had always made her heart skip. And in the background, barely visible but undeniably there, she painted the shadow of her current life, Daniel and the kids and the gallery, all the beautiful things that had come after. When it was finished, she hung it in the gallery's main room with a small plaque beneath it. "Unlimited Love" by Helena Lawrence Reid. In memory of Ethan Sullivan, who taught me that some connections transcend time. The painting became the gallery's centerpiece, and people came from all over to see it. They wrote in the guest book about their own experiences with loss and love, about how the painting captured something essential about the human experience. One afternoon, a young woman came in, recently widowed, crying as she stood in front of the painting. Helena sat with her, holding her hand, and told her about Ethan, about the 6 months they had together and the lifetime of love they had packed into that brief time. "Does it get easier?" the woman asked. "It gets different," Helena said honestly. "The grief becomes part of you, but so does the love, and eventually you realize that carrying both is its own kind of gift." 15 years after Ethan's death, Helena published a book. Unlimited Love, a memoir of loss and life, became a bestseller, resonating with anyone who had ever loved and lost. She donated all the proceeds to cancer research, determined to ensure that other people got the time she and Ethan had been denied. She did interviews and speaking engagements, always wearing the ring Ethan had given her on Christmas Eve all those years ago. People asked if she ever regretted falling in love with someone who was dying, and her answer was always the same: "I regret that we did not have more time. But I do not regret loving him. Those 6 months taught me more about life than all the years before. He showed me how to live fully, how to love without reservation, how to find meaning in whatever time we have. That's not something I would ever regret." Emma became one of Helena's closest friends, a constant presence in her life and the lives of her children. They took trips together, celebrated holidays as an extended family, and kept Ethan's memory alive through stories and traditions. On what would have been Ethan's 50th birthday, they established the Ethan Sullivan Prize for Innovation in Renewable Energy, a $1 million award given annually to scientists making breakthroughs in sustainable technology. 20 years after his death, Helena stood in front of a crowd of thousands at the dedication of the Sullivan Center for Clean Energy, a state-of-the-art research facility funded by Ethan's foundation. Her son, now 15 and showing an aptitude for science that would have made his namesake proud, stood beside her. Her daughter Sophie, 12 and artistic like her mother, held the ribbon for the cutting ceremony. "Ethan Sullivan believed that we have a responsibility to leave the world better than we found it," Helena said in her speech. "He dedicated his life to that principle, and even though his time was cut short, his impact continues to grow. This center is not just about clean energy, it's about hope. It's about believing that we can solve the biggest challenges facing our planet. It's about the unlimited potential of human innovation and determination." The crowd applauded, and Emma, now in her 50s but still looking remarkably like her brother, came to the podium to speak about Ethan's vision. Helena listened, thinking about how far they had all come, how grief and love had intertwined to create something meaningful. That night at home with Daniel, Helena pulled out the box of letters Ethan had written in his final weeks. She reread them occasionally, letting his words comfort her. His final letter, the one she had received after his death, was creased from being folded and unfolded so many times. "Do you ever wish things had been different?" Daniel asked gently. He had never been jealous of Ethan, understanding that Helena's heart was big enough for both loves. "Every day," she admitted, "but not in the way you might think. I wish he had not gotten sick. I wish he had lived long enough to see everything his company has accomplished. But I do not wish I had never loved him. That love made me who I am." Daniel kissed her forehead. "That's one of the reasons I love you. You taught me that the heart is not a finite resource. There's always room for more love." 25 years after Ethan's death, Helena was 61 years old and preparing for her retirement from the day-to-day operations of the gallery. Her son Ethan had graduated from MIT, following in his namesake's footsteps, and was working for Sullivan Solar Solutions as an engineer. Sophie was an art teacher, running workshops for underprivileged kids through the foundation. Helena and Daniel decided to spend their retirement traveling, seeing all the places they had always dreamed of. But before they left, Helena had one more painting to complete. She worked on it for months, pouring everything she had learned about love and loss into the canvas. It showed two figures on a beach at sunset, holding hands as they watched the waves. Only one figure was fully realized, the other fading into light, becoming part of the sky and sea. It was called Remembered, and it was her masterpiece. The painting toured galleries around the world, and Helena used the attention to raise awareness and funds for terminal illness support services. She spoke at conferences about palliative care, about the importance of treating dying patients with dignity and love, about how her time with Ethan had shaped her entire philosophy of caregiving. On the 30th anniversary of Ethan's death, Helena was 66 years old. She and Daniel had been married for 27 years, and she had grandchildren now, Sophie's 2 daughters and Ethan's son. The family gathered at Helena's childhood home in Maine, which she had bought and restored as a vacation house. They spent the weekend on the beach, and Helena told her grandchildren about the first Ethan Sullivan. She showed them pictures and read them parts of his letters. She wanted them to understand that love was not about how much time you had, but about what you did with whatever time you were given. "Was he your first husband, Grandma?" her oldest granddaughter asked. "No, sweetie, we never got married. He died before we could." "That's sad." "It was. But it was also beautiful. He taught me how to love without fear, and that lesson has carried me through my whole life." That evening, after everyone had gone to bed, Helena walked down to the beach alone. She stood at the water's edge, feeling the cold waves lap at her feet, and she talked to Ethan the way she had countless times over the past 30 years. "I kept my promise," she said to the stars. "I lived fully. I loved again. I did not let losing you destroy me. I hope you are proud of everything we have built in your name. I hope you can see how your love created ripples that are still spreading." The wind picked up, and Helena chose to believe it was his answer. She touched the ring she still wore, even after all these years, and smiled. 35 years after Ethan's death, Helena was 71 years old. Daniel had passed away the year before, a heart attack that took him quickly and peacefully. She grieved him deeply, this man who had been her partner for over 3 decades, but she also felt grateful for the time they had shared. Emma, now in her late 60s, came to stay with Helena during the worst of the grief. They sat together in Helena's studio, surrounded by decades of paintings, and talked about the strange beauty of loving and losing. "You think they are together somewhere?" Emma asked. "Ethan and Daniel, I do not know," Helena admitted. "But I like to think that if there's something after this, they are both there, comparing notes on how to deal with me." Emma laughed. Ethan would definitely have advice for him. They sorted through old photographs, and Helena was struck by how young she had been when she met Ethan. 26 years old, her whole life ahead of her, with no idea that a terminal diagnosis would lead to the most transformative relationship of her life. "You ever regret it?" Emma asked. "Falling in love with someone you knew you would lose?" "Never," Helena said firmly. "Not even once." 40 years after Ethan's death, Helena was 76 years old and slowing down. Her son and daughter managed the foundation now, and her grandchildren were adults with careers and families of their own. Sullivan Solar Solutions was a $1 trillion company, and Ethan's vision of affordable clean energy for everyone had largely been realized. Helena spent her days painting and writing, working on a second book about Daniel, and about how loving multiple people across a lifetime did not diminish any individual love, but rather compounded it. She had become a symbol of resilience and hope, someone who had turned grief into purpose and loss into legacy. On a cold January morning, 40 years to the day after Ethan's death, Helena woke up feeling peaceful. She got dressed and went to her studio, where she had been working on one final painting. It showed 3 figures now, Ethan and Daniel standing on either side of her, all of them looking forward toward a bright horizon. She added the final touches, signing her name in the corner, and then sat back to admire her work. It was finished. Everything she had wanted to say about love and time and the courage it takes to keep opening your heart had been captured on canvas. That afternoon, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and Emma, Helena passed away quietly in her sleep. She was 76 years old and had lived a life so full of love and purpose that it seemed impossible to grieve, even though everyone did. At her funeral, they displayed her paintings, dozens of them spanning 5 decades. The Ethan portrait was there, and the beach sunset, and the final 3-figure piece she had completed the day she died. People came from around the world to honor her, artists and scientists and business leaders, all touched by her work and her story. Young Ethan, now 45 and CEO of Sullivan Solar Solutions, gave the eulogy. "My mother named me after a man she loved for 6 months. That could have been a burden, living up to the legacy of someone who achieved so much in such a short life. But she taught me that it was not about matching his achievements. It was about matching his heart." Ethan Sullivan loved without reservation, and my mother carried that lesson forward through everything she did. She loved my father, Daniel. She loved me and my sister. She loved her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren. She loved art and justice and possibility. And through her love, she made the world immeasurably better. Sophie stood next to her brother and read from their mother's final journal entry, written the morning she died. "I have lived 80 years if you count from my birth, or 50 if you count from the morning I met Ethan Sullivan and truly began living. I have loved deeply and lost painfully and found joy in unexpected places. If I could go back and change anything, I would not. Not the 6 months with Ethan that broke my heart, not the decades with Daniel that healed it, not the challenges or the triumphs or the long journey from grief to grace. It has all been exactly what it needed to be. I am ready now to see what comes next, and I hope that wherever Ethan and Daniel are, they have saved me a spot between them, because that's where I have always been happiest, surrounded by love." Emma scattered Helena's ashes on the beach in Maine, mixing them with the ocean Helena had painted 1,000 times. The Sullivan Foundation established the Helena Lawrence Grant for nurses, providing funding for caregivers who showed exceptional compassion and dedication. The galleries Helena had founded continued to showcase emerging artists, and her paintings increased exponentially in value, though her children refused to sell them, choosing instead to loan them to museums so everyone could see them. Her book became required reading in nursing schools and grief counseling programs. Her story was made into a documentary that won an Oscar. But more than any of that, she left behind a legacy of radical love, the kind that said yes even when the odds were impossible, the kind that found meaning in limited time and created unlimited impact. 20 years after Helena's death, her great-granddaughter stood in front of her thesis committee at nursing school, defending her dissertation on palliative care and the importance of emotional connection between caregivers and terminal patients. She cited her great-grandmother's work extensively, and she wore a replica of the ring Ethan had given Helena, a family heirloom passed down through generations. "My great-grandmother taught us that caring for someone who is dying is not about prolonging life at any cost," she said. "It's about honoring the life they have lived and supporting them in making their final chapter meaningful. Her 6 months with Ethan Sullivan changed both of their lives, and the ripples from that brief love are still spreading today, 70 years later. That is the power of unlimited love, love that does not count days but makes every day count. The committee approved her dissertation unanimously, and that night, the young woman went to the Sullivan Center for Clean Energy, which had expanded into a campus of research facilities funded by the foundation. She stood in front of the statue of Ethan Sullivan, erected 50 years earlier, and thought about the great-grandfather she had never met but whose impact shaped every aspect of her life. Behind the statue was a smaller monument, added when Helena died, showing her holding a paintbrush. The inscription read, Helena Lawrence read 1960-2036. She turned 6 months into eternity. And beneath that, a quote from Ethan's final letter. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. The young nurse, whose name was Hannah, touched the monument and made a promise. She would carry forward her great-grandmother's legacy, would treat every patient with the same fierce compassion Helena had shown Ethan. She would remember that behind every diagnosis was a person deserving of love and dignity. She would never forget that sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is simply being present, fully and completely, for whatever time we have. As the sun set over the campus, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that Helena would have loved, Hannah walked back to her apartment thinking about love and time and legacy. Her great-grandmother had been right, she decided. It was never about how long you had. It was about what you did with every precious moment. And if you loved fully, without reservation, without protecting yourself from potential loss, then even 6 months could become unlimited, echoing through generations, changing the world in ways you could never imagine. The story of Helena and Ethan had become legend, passed down through families and taught in schools, but at its core, it was remarkably simple. 2 people met during the worst circumstances imaginable and chose love anyway. They could have maintained professional distance. They could have protected their hearts, but they did not. They dove in completely, and that decision, that singular act of courage, had created ripples that would last forever. And that, Hannah thought, was what unlimited love really meant. Not love that lasted forever in person, but love that transcended time itself, continuing to inspire and transform long after the lovers had gone. Ethan and Helena's 6 months together had become infinite, and their story would continue to remind people that it was always, always worth it to love, no matter the cost, no matter how limited the time. She fell asleep that night thinking about her future, about the patients she would care for, and about the boy she had been dating, wondering if what they had could become something legendary. She did not know yet that they would marry, have children, and build a life together. She did not know that she would name her first daughter Helena. She did not know that she would carry her great-grandmother's wisdom into every interaction, every relationship, every moment of her life. But she knew with absolute certainty that love was the answer. Love was always the answer. And whether you had 6 months or 60 years, the love you gave and received was the only thing that truly mattered, the only thing that would last beyond your final breath, echoing into eternity like ripples on an infinite ocean.